Right, so welcome everybody. Now, welcome to this online associate classroom session. So, in the past, we've run these as an actual classroom session. We've usually managed to get a training room, often at the police headquarters, and it is a classroom session. But with COVID and lockdown and so on, ever since we've done this as a virtual event, so there are one or two slides that still refer to it as if it's a classroom session. So I'm not going to indicate where the fire escapes are and so on in your own homes or holiday homes in the case of some people, or any of those sorts of things, or where the toilets are, or anything like that. You'll be pleased to know. Uh, but a little bit about what we are going to do here. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name's David Reeves. I'm one of the observers here in Northampton. I've been with Northampton about 7 or 8 years now. Having done an advanced test many years ago, I did some volunteering as an observer when I lived up in Warrington, had a massive long break from it, and then came back, did a master's and various other things, and now look after training here, which is why I get to do some of these sessions. Now, I apologies because I haven't been down to some of the meetings for the last, because for other reasons, the last few. So I don't know any of you, I don't think. So can I just really briefly get you to unmute and just briefly introduce yourselves? I know I've seen a couple of the names, I think, as relatively new joiners, new trainees, as it were. So Kath, could I ask you first, since you're on the top of my list?
Yeah, sure. I think I am unmuted. Is that? Can you all
Yes,
hear
yeah,
me?
yeah, I can hear you loud and
Yeah.
clear. Yeah, yeah.
So I started. I don't know, probably a couple of months ago now with Rodwell's as my observer.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Really enjoyed what I've been learning. It's completely revolutionised the way I drive. I'm no longer up and down the gearbox and on off the brakes.
Mm.
And I've got a test date booked for the 24th of next month.
Oh, right. Oh, very good. So you're getting towards the end of your training session, as it were. Robin, I think I've seen your name, but again, I don't think we've met.
No, no, I'm pretty much brand new. I only went to the must have been the September Sunday meet,
Ah,
so I've only just met my observer Gordon,
oh yes,
and
yeah.
like you say, I'm pretty new to all this, and but looking to get stuck in.
Fantastic. Good, Robin. And am I pronouncing, is it Manya or Mandya?
Yes, it's Manya, yes. I've been a full member now for a considerable number of years. I remember when I started doing my training, I was really brainwashed almost when I got back home. There was so much to take in, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And of course, I've stuck with it. And I just thought it'd be good to get a refresher. So thank you very much for letting everybody join.
Excellent. All right. Oh, good to have you back. Okay, let's. What we realized some time ago when we were doing this course is that most of the training that takes place is in your car. And sometimes there's no time to kind of reflect on the theory of it and discuss it in the sort of cold light of day without driving and so on. So the idea of this session was to back up a little bit and have some thought about the system and the processes that we're trying to instill, and hopefully complement the information you're receiving from your observers in your driving sessions when we go along. Now, normally, as I said, I mentioned this is normally an actual classroom session, and what we normally do straight afterwards is a demonstration drive. We get some other observers that, and then we can talk through in the car what we do. Clearly, unless you're pop round to my house, that's not going to happen in this one. So I wouldn't advise that because I'm going out. But so we're not going to do that test drive bit today. But if you're working with an observer, if it's useful for you, get them to do a demonstration drive for you. If there's something you're not understanding or doesn't quite make sense, get them to demonstrate it. We're always happy to do that. Moving on a little bit, let's talk first of all about where does this advanced driving come from? How have we invented this thing called advanced driving? Well, we didn't invent it. It came from a number of publications. Now, the most important one is we're talking about driving as safely and as responsibly as possible. So most of the rules that we abide by come from the highway code. So again, if like a lot of people, you haven't looked at the highway code since the day you passed your test, your ordinary test, good idea to buy a copy of this. Actually, you can look at the rules online and so on. You don't have to buy it, but it's not very expensive. It's worth getting a copy of this. There's another publication as well about traffic signs. Again, these change over time, so it's worth.
David,
Yeah,
the thing I'd say about the highway code is I'm not sure there's an up-to-date version published yet.
there is one about to come out. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of consultations about stuff. It is coming out fairly soon. So if you were concerned about that, just look at the online version for now. But I'm not quite sure the publication date of it. Now, it's an interesting document. It's a mixture. It says, is it law or advice? Anybody got any thoughts on that? Highway code. Must you do what it says in the good book or not?
Presumably, you must obey the road signs that are listed in it.
Yes. The answer to my question, actually, it's a mixture of both, which is sort of what you said. There are two factors. Some of the rules in there say you must do this, and if it says that, it's backed up by law. And in the case of road signs or say traffic lights, say you went through a red light, you're contravening the Road Traffic Act, and that's obviously, it's not just the rule that says you don't go past red lights, through red lights and so on. There is another factor if you're to be guilty of dangerous or even careless driving, you've got to drive below the standard of that of a competent driver, and the assumption is a competent driver follows the highway code. So there's a double whammy there, really. But so it's a mixture of advice, but it also reiterates what the law is. From a technique point of view, what we've used in IAM comes from a manual called Roadcraft. And this is the police driver's manual. This is a picture of the most up-to-date copy, which came out, I think, last year. Basically, this has been around for quite a few years. Probably, if John, my colleague who usually does this with me, would tell me precisely what the date is, something like 1940 or something, or 50. Updated throughout the years, obviously to reflect road conditions and new thinking and so on. And this is the manual that's used by police officers trained in, well, not ordinary driving, but also into more advanced stuff, pursuit and so on, because they needs to get their skills and observation up to a good level. It's also used by the other emergency services and the army, I believe. So this is where we get the ground rules from. Now, clearly, some of this isn't appropriate to us. I have got a copy, it's probably on the very untidy bookshelves behind me, but it does have things like how to work through traffic, how to drive on a blue light and things like that, and the use of sirens, which would be great fun to do, but unfortunately we're not allowed to do that. So, but all very interesting. But now, because this is quite a tome really, and is aimed at police and other emergency services, what we also issue is an associate book, which hopefully you've got, or if you've only just joined, it might take a week or two for it to arrive. And this really lays out our syllabus about what we want to do. And it's based completely on Roadcraft. So if you're a SWAT, you could get a copy of Roadcraft, but actually all the information you need is in that advanced course, the details that come with it. But fundamentally, it's a practical course. So you will learn most of what you need to know via your drives with an observer. So moving on then from that, what this Roadcraft is about and what our syllabus is about is something we just refer to as the system, or more correctly, the system of car control. Because we fundamentally want to simplify matters and have one system that we use all of the time, so that we're not we don't want to make things over complex. We want to make it as straightforward as possible. Now, the idea of the system is that we have this one drill, this one mechanism for dealing with a hazard, any sort of hazard. So it's worth thinking for a moment about what is a hazard. What do we mean by a hazard? And we've just had somebody else join us, which is that Jack? Morning, Jack. So here's the definition of a hazard that we use. Anything with actual or potential danger. Now, why are we saying this? Why are we making a point of this? Well, most people recognize actual danger, the car coming towards them, the very sharp bend to which they're heading rather too fast.
Yes, because I'm...
Oh, morning, Rod. But they don't always recognize potential danger. And this is what we're trying to encourage in our thinking, of thinking ahead, planning, trying to predict what is going to happen. So actual or potential danger. Now, beyond that, we break those hazards into three main types. And it's worth thinking about these. The three types are physical features, so bends, junctions, all those sorts of things that we tend to recognize straight away. And if as you go through the training process, your observer will encourage you to do spoken thoughts, a kind of commentary on your driving. And people often find it quite easy to do the physical features. Oh, we're approaching a bend, there's a junction ahead, there's a roundabout ahead, something like this. But there are other sorts of hazards, clearly. So physical features is the first one, and they're static. They don't move. Occasionally the council might remodel a junction or something, but by and large, they're solid things. They don't change. So the next sort of feature is the hazard created by other road users. Now, these are probably the most dangerous ones because they're dynamic. They're changing all the time. So other road users, other car drivers, cyclists, pedestrians, dog walkers, what have I missed out? Horse riders, motorcycles, anybody else using the road. Now, again, we often think about this in terms of other car drivers, but it's much bigger than that. It's anybody using the road. And because they're going places, they're moving around, it's a dynamic hazard. It's obviously not static. And so we have to evaluate that one as well. But there's another sort of dynamic hazard, another changeable hazard, and that's the last one, road and weather conditions. Because this road that we drive every day might be absolutely fine with no particular problems to us until it snows, or it rains and it floods, or there's a lot of loose gravel on it because it's been resurfaced, or there's a lot of mud on it because of a building site or access to a farm or something. So again, these sorts of conditions are transient as well, that they may be okay one day but not the next. So we've got to bear in mind when we're looking and considering hazards, these three types: physical features, the static ones; other road users, the most problematic probably; and the changeable ones due to weather and road conditions. Sorry, I'm jumping around here. I've sorted it out now. Right, there we go. So what we want is just one system that will cope, a framework which will let us cope with any sort of hazard. And this is what we're calling this system of car control. So we want it to be safe, fundamentally, methodical in the sense that we do the same framework of actions each time, but doesn't leave anything out. So this is why we get this system. Now, the first part of the system, I should have asked you really, can anybody remember how the system goes? Maybe you've read through the notes yet or something. Anybody want to remind me what the system is?
So well, obviously information, and then is it position or speed? Speed, position.
Very good. Yeah, information, position. After that,
Speed and gear.
very good.
Acceleration gear, yeah.
Gear and acceleration. Very good. Well done. Okay. Now I'm just going to fill that in now. The thing is, the information bit carries on all the way through because you're constantly gathering information. You might spot a junction from some distance away and see the warning signs, but actually the fine detail of the information you need is concerning the other traffic and pedestrians and things right on the junction. So you're gathering information all of the time, from as soon as you spot the hazard to actually dealing with it. So information runs all the way through. So that's not really in sequence because that's happening all the time. But overlaid with that is, as you say, position, speed. Now those overlap slightly because although we talk about them as we consider this one first, then this one, we might be doing the same thing. We might be able to do the two things at the same time. We might be changing position slightly while starting to slow down, say for a roundabout or something. Once we've got to the correct speed, then we can change gear. Now, it may be that you've got an automatic car, and I'm sure once everybody's driving electric cars that don't have gearboxes, we might get rid of this. But for automatic cars, the mechanics of the car will do the gear change, but only once we've got to the correct speed. So we're trying to get rid of the speed first and then take the appropriate gear. So if I don't know what the hazard is yet, but let's say it meant that we had to slow down to say 30 miles an hour, then maybe third gear's appropriate. Maybe we've had to slow right down to say 20 miles an hour or less, then maybe second gear is appropriate. So the gear is completely dependent on what speed we've had to bring the car down to. So position, speed, gear, and now we're arriving at the hazard, so we can just drive through the hazard. We've now got our hands back on the wheel, we're in the right gear, we're doing the right speed, we can drive through the hazard. And that's what this acceleration is. It's not kind of necessarily zooming away, it's driving through the hazard completely under control, hands back on the wheel, in the right gear, at the right speed. So there's our system. Information all the way through, position, speed, gear, and acceleration. So let's have a look at that in a little bit more detail. So provides a simple and repetitive system of driving which omits no detail, leaves nothing to chance, and when properly perfected provides that one ingredient to road safety: time to react. The reason for doing this is we're trying to get you to think about the hazard somewhat earlier than you might have done otherwise, and consider each of those all those steps in time, so that by the time you arrive at the hazard, you've got the maximum amount of information you have, the car is completely under control. So the first step that we mentioned was information, and as I already pointed out, the key thing about information is that it runs all the way through the hazard, because as we come towards the hazard, say a roundabout, we'll get more and more information as we get closer to it. And that might change our plan of how we deal with it. When we come up to it, the roundabout looks empty from a distance. We think, okay, I may be able to just drive straight onto the roundabout and deal with it. As we get closer, we realize there's more traffic, there's something else going on. So we're continually processing that information. But actually, the information phase isn't just about receiving information. It's about processing it and possibly giving out information. So what we can do then is we have this acronym TUG, taking in information. Look all around you, scout front and side, use your mirrors, and that should be every few seconds, no more than 7. To check all the way around the vehicle, particularly behind you. But then it's about using that information to make a driving plan and planning for the unexpected. Now, 'cause sometimes you can see people who seem to be looking out of the window, but some bizarrely don't seem to be able to process the information there or do anything about it. You know, the people who sort of zoom up behind a vehicle on the motorway and then suddenly brake just as they are sort of 6 inches away from them. Why aren't they processing that information? I'm not sure. And the final bit is giving out information. So the information phase itself has got these 3 stages in it that we're constantly going around and reconsidering our plan. So, observation, we take in information. We might see road signs. Here's a quick question before I move on with this. If you've got 2 road signs on the same pillar, which one do you read first? Which comes first, crossroads or bend to the right?
The top one.
Yes, that's absolutely right. When I did the first time I did the advanced test back in 1980 something or other, I was told authoritatively it was the other way around, and I found out subsequently that was indeed the case. Historically, it used to be the other way around. We were always told that if you laid this post flat on the ground, therefore you'd come to the bend for. That's not true. I should distill this, but this changed at some point. But you're absolutely right. It's that one, but though they've got to be within, I think it's 100 yards to be on the same post. But anyway, slight digression now. So we're taking in information. The most obvious one is visually. We see it, which is why having reasonable eyesight, wearing glasses if you need them and so on is vitally important. And there's all sorts of statistics about the number of people with uncorrected vision driving around and so on, really quite worrying. But that's our primary way of getting information, is seeing it. But there are other ways as well. Obviously, we can hear things. We can hear horn warnings. We can hear other traffic. We can hear roadworks, people sometimes. That's quite important as well. And again, I'm slightly wary when you see that sort of car going past that sounds like a mobile disco with something, and you think, are you really able to hear what's going on? Or people with headphones and stuff. I've just been on holiday to France. I'm intrigued to learn that it's illegal to drive in France with headphones on. I'm not saying we should do that here, but it's one source of information you might be blocking if you wear headphones or something to do this. Smell. Really? I thought I wasn't sure about this. We will say this one, but if you talk to any motorcyclists, they will say, yes, you can smell diesel that's spilt on the road, and that's extremely slippery. You need to avoid that absolutely. And I thought I was dubious about this completely until a few years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, a friend, for it while they had returned to studying, lent me their Caterham. They said if I insured it and so on, I could drive it for a year. So it's great fun. I don't even know Caterham. It's a very low sports car, completely open and so on, and reasonably good acceleration, but you do feel very, very vulnerable in them because they're so low. And it's completely open. And when I was driving it home through some country lanes, I got this absolutely amazing smell of horse poo. It was quite another. And just as I came around the next corner, there were 2 horses, and being ridden, and I laughed out loud because I'd never found out. I'd never quite believed this one about the smell and so on. I should say it's not so good in an open car like a Caterham when you drive through the horse poo, because the front wheels, although they've got a mud guard, it tends to fling it backwards, where you have to kind of duck as it goes over your head. And the worst bit is it landed on the exhaust pipe and kind of cooks then, which is not. Anyway, digressed again there. The other one is feel. Anybody driven on ice? Anybody driven where the car started to aquaplane or something? You can feel it through the steering. So be aware of all this information coming to you, not just looking, but all the other ways that you can detect what's going on as you drive. Right. Visually, what is going on here? Anybody like to talk me through any of the hazards you can see in this picture, which is actually, I don't know how many of you are from Northampton. This is in Northampton. That's Carlsberg Brewery. Is it London Road? I forget what they call that road, but it's heading sort of northwards roughly into the centre of Northampton. Robin, I'm going to pick on you, I think. Can you unmute for me?
There we go. So,
Yep.
so taking the first hazard is the parked car,
Right.
kind of like half on, half off, which you need to go round. And then we've got a traffic island.
Oh, something then.
Here.
Oh, this one, yeah.
So, yeah, traffic island.
Yeah.
Then you've got the taxi crossing or turning or whatever he's doing. So these two cars are braking because of that. So and then obviously further down you've got a traffic lights, traffic building up.
Yeah.
That one.
That's pretty good. I'm impressed with that. Manya, have you got anything you'd add to that?
Well, there's also the yellow car or van parked a bit further down, narrowing the lane. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, there's a pedestrian next to him. Maybe that's the driver getting into it. Maybe that's causing cars to go. Yeah, there's a number of hazards here. Well done, both of you. I'm not really going to add any more to that. If we see a car pull out, I always wonder about the person that's been waiting for 5 minutes behind them. Are they going to? They're not too much of a danger, but the person behind who leaves it to the very last minute might be. So I like to be prepared just in case somebody does that. But yeah, well spotted the rest of you for the van. So we've got some hazards that we need to deal with straight away. Is this person going to pull away? I can't quite see from here if there's anybody in there. So we're looking for signs that they might do. Exhaust gases, fumes coming out of the exhaust pipe, indications, brake lights, anything that might mean they're going to pull away without looking. Brake lights, as you saw. So we've got some things that are immediate and some things that are a little bit further away. And we're trying to deal with both sorts of hazards as we drive and prioritize. One thing we haven't got, which you can't really show in the slide, if I react to those things in good time, where's my biggest danger coming from? And it's not in the picture, potentially.
It might be the car behind you.
Very good, very good. Yes, obviously we haven't got a rear view mirror to see what's going on in here, but if we did, before we do anything, we need full awareness of what's actually behind us. Very good. Here's another one, totally different scenario, country road. Who should I pick on this time? Rowan Man. Have we lost?
Yes, we seem to have lost Kathy.
Yeah, I suddenly realised we've.
No, I'm back.
Oh, you're back. Okay.
You did lose me. I think the Wi-Fi at this cottage dropped out, so I've switched
Oh,
to
right, I don't know.
my phone now.
Okay, jolly good. How much did you miss? Have you just come back, or have you been following?
No, I came back at the end of that slide about all the hazards, and I came back just as I was about to say the same thing as Manya about the man by the yellow van.
Oh, right. So, I don't know if you're following it on a phone now. This might be incredibly small, but
No, I just set up the Wi-Fi from my phone. I'm still on
okay, got you. All right. So hazards on this one. This is a little bit more tricky.
Well, obviously there's a mud on the road sign.
Yeah.
And you can see some to the right.
Yes, it's really well chewed up on that corner, isn't it?
And actually, you wonder if it has perhaps recently rained.
Yeah, good. Road surface looks quite wet and it's sort of shiny in that bit. It could even be ice. I don't know what the time of year is or anything.
The road narrows. There's a sign and there's a sign of bends, and in fact we can see the road bending away to the left, also on the brow of a hill.
Yeah, good.
There's a small sign stuck on a lamp. There. I don't know what that says. So there might be something else. It might be something like concealed entrance.
Good plot. Actually, it says eggs for sale.
Right, yeah, well, okay.
My eyesight's not that good either, but I'm told that's what it says.
But equally, though, around the corner there may be people pulled up in a driveway buying eggs.
Absolutely, very good point, and it's in somewhere.
And I don't. What's that white thing sticking up just on the brow of the hill?
Don't know, but I think it's one of those posts that marks the edge of a road or something.
Yeah, it looks like there's an entrance to the right as well, a muddy entrance.
I really can't add any more to that. Basically, yeah, this has given us a clue. There are farm entrances, or there is a lot of mud. We've been warned there's mud on the road. It looks like there's an entrance there from the right, as you pointed out. There's definitely something there. And sometimes that's all you need. There's something, I can't make it out just yet, but it's enough for you to be wary that there are hidden dangers. The chances are this has been chewed up by big vehicles like tractors or lorries or something. So it might be indicative that we're sharing the road with some big vehicles. And then you picked out the road, so the road does narrow as it comes to the top of that hill there. And double bend. Which way does the double bend go? Is it going to the left or the right?
So although the road looks like it's going to go to the left, the actual sign is indicating that the road will sharply bend right and then left.
Yeah. So that means that's not the one they're talking about, basically.
No,
There's another one beyond that we've got to be aware of. Very good. Very good. Now, we've been talking about information. So the next thing that we need to look at are, I'm just going to switch off my laser pointer. The next thing we need to look at is how we give out information to other road users. Now, the obvious one is indicators. We can, so apologies if anybody drives an Audi, because I don't think they're fitted, are they, on an Audi? Is that? I made that joke once when we did some training with the 3 special constables, and I found all 3 of them drove Audis. Anyway, so I should learn not to do those things. But the standard way of telling people that you're going to turn left or right or whatever, or stop, is using the indicators. Now, what we encourage you to do in IM is really think about who's benefiting from your signal, looking around you, trying to work out who benefits from the signal. Possibly more about that later. Now, before there were indicators, of course, there were arm signals. They're still in the highway code. They still have their use, sometimes for one reason or other, in very crowded traffic and other situations. People can't quite see your indicators because whatever. So it's sometimes useful to reinforce it with arm signals. So it's worth just being aware of that. Very occasionally, it's useful to have hand signals as well. Courtesy signals. We're being able to just thank people for whatever they've done is a very, very useful one. When they do you a favor, let you out or something like that, it's 2. 1, you thank them. B, when you get this situation where people let you out and it's not, we try not to encourage that because it can confuse the pants off lots of people if people are doing lots of strange things. But if from time to time people do that and you need to take the opportunity, by raising your hand and thanking them and making eye contact, you've confirmed with them that you are in fact going to pull out or take their offer, as it were. Now, it's not foolproof, but it at least gives some sort of confirmation, and it's polite as well, and it goes a long way to encourage sort of friendliness on the roads. Brake lights obviously indicate that you're using the brakes to slow the car. Now, the thing is, as you progress as advanced drivers, you plan ahead, you vary your speed, very often more and more on the accelerator, because you look well ahead and spot there's a bend or a hazard coming and come off the gas, which means you tend to do less hard braking. So it does mean sometimes you have to rethink it a bit and think, I'm actually losing speed quite happily just by taking my foot off the gas. But actually I want to give a signal to the person behind me because they're 6 inches from my bumper. And so sometimes we use the brakes only to give a signal, or very lightly more to give a signal. And it's worth considering that sometimes, that it may be that you have to touch the brakes to give a signal to the person behind, but it is a form of indicating. Hazard warning lights. Hazard warning lights. Here's a question here. I'll not pick on somebody. Somebody can, whoever wants to, can pick on this one. What are hazard warning lights for? When can you use hazard warning lights?
To indicate when either yourself or something in front of you is a hazard to other drivers.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Can you use them when you're moving?
Yes.
In what circumstances would you use them when you're moving?
If you were if you were in like perhaps limp mode, these modern cars when they go into so you restricted performance, so you might be a good reason to put your hazards on.
Yeah.
Another one is on the motorway when the traffic ahead of you has come to a stop. You can hazard other people behind you.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
Also, if you're being towed, of course.
Yes, that might be useful. Technically, according to the highway code, initially they said you have to be stationary. It's where your car becomes a hazard because it's stopped in some peculiar place, and therefore you're a hazard. You're warning other drivers of your stationary vehicle. And initially, and most of the highway code still says that you shouldn't use them when you're moving, full stop. So technically, according to the highway code, not in limp mode, not when you're being towed, though I fully accept I probably would do for the extra, but according to the highway code. However, there is an exception. The exception that they have of the highway code is on motorways and dual carriageways, in other words, fast roads, where the traffic suddenly slows down or stops, to warn other drivers of the sudden deceleration. And we've probably all seen that on the motorway, particularly where you come up to something, a massive great roadblock for some reason, and people put their hazards on. I think that's a very useful way of doing it, a thing to do. Okay, next one, horn signals. When should you use a horn signal? Who am I going to pick on? I might pick on somebody this time. Kath, I'll go for you because you're unmuted at the minute.
I was just going to say, perhaps when you're approaching the brow of a very steep bridge, like a little canal bridge, something like that, and you can't see the other side, and the other side obviously can't see you either.
Oh, the good one. So a kind of warning. So effectively, more generically then, a warning to other users of your presence. What about when somebody does something stupid, kind of, overtakes on the inside or does something you don't like? Permissible
to
kind
all the time, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's when most people tend to use them. It's in sort of lieu of a swear word. And probably actually not in lieu of it, but just to back it up, really, because the person can't hear the swearing going on in their car, I suspect. But that's not how they go. It's a real shame because it'd be really useful. Sometimes a beep on the horn or something is just to let somebody know that you're there or whatever. It would be really useful, and it's been completely devalued by the overuse of it as a alternative to swearing, which is a real shame. Finally, there we are. Headlights. When can you flash headlights and what do they mean?
According to the highway code, they're for the same reason you use a horn, aren't they?
Absolutely. To warn people of your presence. So maybe just before you overtake. And again, you mentioned humpback bridges. Sometimes lights can be really useful. Put them on full beam, and on a dark night, they're more visible and more useful than a horn warning. But again, we've got into a whole thing of flashing people to tell them that they can pull out and all sorts of stuff like that. So the whole message has got really, really confused about that, and it's a shame. Now, one of our members trains truck drivers, and I had another guy who was a trainee who was drove for a living, and they're gradually phasing that out. All this business of flashing people to let them back in and stuff, they're telling them not to do it, because if you're driving a car, you're responsible for it. By all means, let people in, but let them make the decision. The driver has to make the decision. So don't be flashing and encouraging them to do something. By all means, leave them a gap to move into and things like that, but let them totally make the decision, and don't encourage them with headlight flashes. So one day, if everybody gets the message, we'll get back to using it simply as a warning that I am here, rather than encourage them to take some other action. Okay, good. Positioning. So we said positioning was important. That's part of the system as well. And there are two main reasons we change position. The first one always is safety. We want to be in a position of safety. So if we can maximize our safe position, we may drop back from another car, we may do something like that increases our relative safety. So the first thing is safety, and the second thing is visibility. It might be that we get a better view by changing our road position slightly, but we try not to compromise safety over getting a better view. Now, as we drive, sometimes it's better to be closer to the verge, and sometimes it's better to be closer to the center line. And sometimes it's useful to come up with some terminology for this. Finally, at the age of 62, I've mastered the term near side, center, and offside, because I have to admit, I never understood when I took the car to the garage and said, I need this tire change, the driver side or near side, offside, yeah, the one by the passenger door. Near side means near the curb, center and offside. We also distinguish it saying on our carriageway, on the left-hand side. And this bit is the opposite carriageway. The reason for saying this, and some of you who started your training, coming up to a left-hand bend up here, we would tend to be on the left-hand side, on the near side. And if this went to the right, we'd be on the nearer the white lines, on the offside. If you read roadcraft and the bits about driving very fast for police drivers, if the road's clear, they will be on the other side of the road to give them a maximum view and maximum cornering. Clearly, we're not allowed to do that. That would be bad. That's the opposite carriageway. So from our perspective, offside means on our side of the road. Now, here's a situation here. We've got a van here. It's got, I'll put the laser pointer back on. It's indicating left still, but those look like brake lights are on. So maybe he's just hopped back in the van. Maybe he's delivered something, or just. How many times have you seen a van like this pull out even though it's still got the indicator left on from when they stopped? I had a driving instructor video I saw said the fact that the indicator is going proves only one thing, that the bulb hasn't blown. You've got to take it with a little bit of caution, but that's a warning sign when you get something like that. So I'm moving my position towards the center of the road. One, for safety, because he's either just pulled out and he's now going to just jump out this door without looking, or they're just about to pull away. Either way, I'm going to put as much space between me as is reasonably possible. And the second part is the visibility, because if I'm tucked in behind him, I can see very little. If I'm over here, I've got a great view down the road. So by moving out early, I've got all the options open. I've got a great view and I'm in a position of safety. So what about this one? Now we've got a sweeping left-hand bend. We've got the chevrons that show this. By moving towards the right, I open up the view a bit. I get a slightly earlier view of anything coming around the bend. But this is tempered by a position of safety, because if it's a very tight bend and I really can't see around here, there's a possibility of somebody driving around here and cutting the corner or coming in close to this line, or a motorcyclist, at sort of 45 degrees to get around the corner. So it may be that being close to this line is quite dangerous. So safety first, I'll move out to that line, but if it's quite a tight bend and I can't see, I'll move back a bit to give me that safety margin. But generally, on a left-hand bend, we move to the right, and on a right-hand bend, we would move to the left. So here is a left-hand bend first. So we'll move out to the right, and as soon as the road opens up, I can resume my position, but probably as I go into that road, I can now go into the left, ready for that bend. So I can kind of link them together. So it becomes one nice flowing motion of picking up the position ready for the next bend. And so this is, again, trying to illustrate that as soon as I've got the view there, it's going to pick up my position for the next bend and then take that one. So we can link these things together with good observation and so on. It doesn't have to be a sudden jerk from one to the other. You can make a nice transition between those. So where have we got to? Information we talked about, position we talked about, speed. And really you can either go faster or slower. And for going slower, we're generally going to use the brakes. Now, for small adjustments of speed, obviously, we can simply take our foot off the accelerator. And in good time, we can gently make gentle changes to the speed simply using the accelerator. But for all the other occasions, when we need to lose speed for a hazard, like a roundabout, a junction, a bend, we're going to go for the brakes. Okay, so we have this mantra: brakes are to slow, gears are to go. Why do we do that? Because actually everybody looks younger than me, I suspect, on this call, but years ago, when brakes weren't so good, people were taught, when they learned to drive, to go through all of the gears as they slowed down. Okay, well, luckily cars only had the 4 gears, so it wasn't too bad. So you're in 4th gear and you come up to a hazard, all right, start slowing down, into 3rd, down into 2nd, and then maybe into 1st if you needed it. So you went down through all of the gears. We're saying no need to do that. The brakes on modern cars are much, much better. No need to do that. All you're going to do is go for the brakes. And we'll use those. And once we're at the right speed, we'll do 1 gear change. That's one occasion where our hand can leave the wheel and do the gear change. We don't, and therefore, all the rest of the time, we have much better control of the car because we've got both hands on the wheel. So, and the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to have what we call progressive braking. So when I start to brake, I touch the brake really lightly, just touching it, just getting it to bite. And when it's starting to grip, and you can feel it starting to slow the car, then increase the pressure. So your foot starts gently, then increases the pressure. And then when you're getting to the right speed, eases off again. So it's very, very subtle. Now, what this means is it says that braking should take a minimum of 4 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So sometimes when you're watching cars in front of you, you can see the brake lights flash on as they touch the brake, and you think, well, that's not been on long enough to really change the speed. Very often, look out for it. It's often when somebody's following somebody too close, and the second they think, oh, I'm going to hit them, they hit the brakes, and then they're back again. And whereas we're saying, well, just back off a bit, look at the situation ahead. If you need to brake, gentle braking, firm braking, gentle braking. And actually, if you do that, you can brake really hard and it still feels gentle. You can get away with it by easing on the brakes really hard and then easing them off again. So feathering them on, feathering them off. Acceleration sense, though, is spotting when you might need to slow down beforehand and easing off the gas. No point in coming hammering into hazards and things that you saw half a mile ago. Why not just ease off the gas beforehand? Gives you more time to deal with the hazard and so on as you approach. So we're looking to correct this. This is part of the system. We're looking to correct the speed to the right speed as early as reasonably possible. Gear. Now, more and more people are driving automatics or electric vehicles these days. So this, to some degree, will go away. But while the rest of us enjoy driving manual cars, it's about selecting the right gear. And I've already mentioned what we try and do is slow down to the right speed for the hazard. Let's say it was a roundabout and we're slotting into some traffic. So we might be down to less than 20 miles an hour. We're going to slow right down to that speed and then take the gear, say second gear. But it's completely dictated by our speed. Now, what this means is, if we're going to do all these things, if we're going to brake to the right speed, and then quite separately, we're going to change gear, and all that's going to happen before we get to the hazard, we've got to start that process a little bit earlier. We're trying to get away from the idea that you brake and change gear and do everything at the same time. We want it broken into separate stages. Because that means by the time you get to the hazard, we want to be at the right speed and in the right gear, and all we have to do is drive through the hazard while we're looking and paying full attention to it with full control of the car. So avoid late braking and snatch gear changes. These are one of the most common hazards, and it's one of the things we change people's hazards, because typically people have got used to braking later and then changing gear at the same time. And but anybody who drives manual cars, tends to be the thing that people have to work on most to change some of their habits if they've been driving a long time. One of the issues can be correctly holding the gear stick. Sounds bizarre, but sort of wiggling it around and doing something. We like to have our thumb up like this, and so we can change gear. With a possible exception, if you are going into first or second gear, one technique is to turn your hand over completely, thumb down, because that way, does that work on the thing? That way it'll push against the gear knob. Usually if you're in neutral, the spring holds it in line with third and fourth gear. So by turning it over and pushing against it, that's a definite push. There's less chance of getting the wrong gear. So we have some people think it's a bit like a Masonic handshake. You can spot advanced drivers because they turn their hand over when they go to first and second gear. And I don't know, you may have seen it advertised. There's an event at Silverstone called Carcraft. It's aimed at young drivers, but you can go along if they've got places. It's well worth going as a, I was going to say a grown-up, but somebody above the age of, I think I'm safe here, above the age of 25 or whatever it's aimed at. So I went along, I didn't say anything. And part of it was an assessed drive with this police advanced driver. So the other guy, there was two of us in the car. I volunteered to just sit in the back for the first ride. This guy he was the classic salesman driver. He drove everywhere with one hand, had never had any idea what the speed limit was ever. And it was quite funny because the advanced driver we had was this very rough, tough guy from the firearms branch. And he wasn't pulling any punches either when he gave him some feedback, which was along the lines of, "It's a good job I didn't have my bloody book with me, because I could have booked you for 4 things in the first 2 miles." Because he had no idea about the scene. Anyway, so eventually, having done that, we swapped over. I cockpit checker said, "Right, okay, off you go. Whenever you." I turned my hand over, go into first gear. He said, "You've had some advanced training." So within 15 seconds, I was sussed. Anyway, back to the plot. Gear change only when you're at the right speed for the hazard. Now, it doesn't mean you've got to chug along at whatever. It might be that if you're in traffic heading up to a roundabout, the traffic itself is a hazard. It might be you have to deal with that first and slow down and then change gear. Hello, Alex. I see you just joined. Hello. Good morning. Finally, we've got acceleration. So often within the system, we're talking about smoothly driving away, applying acceleration. Again, just as we said with the brakes, anybody been in a car where they drive it as if it's an on-off switch, where you're constantly going as your nose presses against the windscreen and then back again as they hit the accelerator? We don't want that. We want it as smooth as possible. Now, apart from it being much more comfortable for the driver and less wear and tear on things like the brakes and everything else, and being more fuel efficient because we're not constantly accelerating just to brake again, it's good for road handling, because every time you accelerate, the balance of the car changes. As you accelerate, the nose goes down. You probably notice that when you accelerate, it goes up rather. When you brake, the nose goes down. You're shifting the balance of the car. Now, if we can do that gently, the balance changes. Now, in the extreme, if it's very wet conditions, that sudden change of balance can be enough to initiate a skid. And one of the things they train fast police drivers to do is drive incredibly smoothly, because if you are close to the limit of adhesion, when the tyres are going to stop sticking to the road, you need that change in balance to happen very gently as you move on. So we worked through the elements of the system there. Any questions on what we've done so far about the system itself? We're going to expand on that a bit in the second half, because we normally take a comfort break at about now, which is good. You'll have to wear that one. Fantastic. So we're all set. Jolly good. I shall continue. Here's a quick question. This is just an icebreaker here. Okay. Here's the stopping distance, as we know, because we've all read the highway code from cover to cover. 30 miles an hour. It's about, I'm sure it used to be 75 feet from my memory, but 80 feet. You can stop there. That's what, because it says so in the manual, so it must be true. So there's our child there. See that point there? We're doing 30 miles an hour. We spot them, screech of brakes, and we stop just before them. However, the car next to us in this hypothetical situation, identical car, identical details, sees this person at exactly the same time and hits the brake at exactly the same time. And obviously they're going somewhat faster. So clearly the stopping distance is somewhat further. How fast are they doing when they hit this child here? Anyone like to have a guess? In fact, I'll ask each of you to have a guess. You may have seen this example before, I don't know. Kath, you're on mute in a minute, but...
really no idea. Physics and maths was never my forte.
Have a guess. You're a driver though, but so
another 10 foot. Another 10 foot.
feet. Yeah. So what speed do you think you're doing when we agree that 10 foot, you need another 10 foot or so to stop. So what speed when you hit that person?
5 miles an hour.
5. Okay. Robin, your guess.
I reckon much higher. I think about 25 maybe.
Oh, good. Alex?
About 20.
About 20. So we've got the full range from quite slow to mid-range to... So the stopping distance then would be, as you say, a little bit further. That's another 40 foot in working in feet. But the actual speed is about 28. And you're right. You were not criticising your math. The maths is actually more complicated. and it's not intuitive, because actually, cast your minds back to your physics at school or whatever, and the energy that you have is half mv squared, where so m was the mass of the car, so the heavier the car, the more momentum it's got, as you'd expect. But the other part of it is not the speed, it's the speed squared, the speed times itself. So every time you double the speed, you quadruple the amount of energy you've got to get rid of. And that's what you're doing when you're braking. So the person doing it like that is almost hitting them at the same speed as if the other car hadn't braked at all. Which is quite, and when you do the same sums with motorway speeds, it gets really quite scary. You know, the 80, if you have one doing 70, one doing 80 and do the same sort of experiment, the one there is still doing about 70. It makes a massive difference. Anyway, I digress. That was really just to get brains working again. We've talked about the system of car control. We've talked about the system and what it comprises of and when we use it, but it requires a certain amount of planning. We're looking ahead and we're creating what we call a driving plan. And this is what you're going to do in the next few seconds. If this happens, then I'm going to create, this is what I plan to do. We're trying to get your brain to think about what you're going to do before you do it. Sounds reasonable. Rather than simply being reactive, because most drivers just react to what happens in front of them. We want to kind of preload your brain with some possible scenarios and then work on that. So we need you to anticipate. We need you to be a bit of a mind reader and try and work out what's going to happen next. And you sort of encourage people to kind of predict the future a bit. So what's going to happen here? Who haven't I asked? Manya, I'm going to pick on you this time. What can we reasonably?
Well, you can obviously see that there's a car coming out from the side road on the left-hand side. And it looks as if there's been frost, so you need to also adjust your speed to that. The road might be a bit icy.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned before yourself, there might be some other cars coming behind the grey car.
Yeah, good. I don't think I can extract much more on that. We could have commented, I think further down the road there is a parked vehicle. As you say, there could be one behind here. Things that we can do. The first thing is that you picked, that was well done, by the way. I don't think I can pick any more from that, is to preload your brain that if there's a car waiting here, they will pull out. Because what happens in your brain, or what happens in most people, is 99 times out of 100, you drive down this road, there's a car waiting, and they continue to wait. That's what happens normally. You drive on, nothing happens. One day the car pulls out in front of you, and the first thing your brain does is says that never happens. And then you go, it doesn't happen. And then eventually it gets overridden by the thought, it just has happened, there's a car in front of me, and you've lost vital seconds or parts of a second. But by assuming or preloading in your brain that that car is going to pull out in front of you, or might, you gain vital seconds. When they do, you go, oh, I thought that was going to happen, and brake, and that's it. So we're trying to predict what's going to happen, like that car pulling out, and that gives us those vital seconds. Now, in a complicated environment, that's all very well. That's a nice, simple scenario, but actually hazards happen in multiples. There are people, there are cars, there are road junctions, and so on. So we constantly have to prioritize. So let's have a look at this one. Who am I going to pick on? Who answered this one last? I've forgotten who I got to last. Kath. It looks like you're struggling to see it now in the light.
Yeah. I don't want to rub salt into any wounds, but the sun's out here.
Yeah, well, no sympathy whatsoever. Then. Is if you're having difficulty, I'm going to pick on Robin
No,
instead.
no, that's fine. That's
Oh,
fine.
you're all right. Okay, I'll let you.
Yeah, yeah.
What can you
So
see?
what am I look?
What are the
So
hazards?
there's a
We're in this car, obviously. We're on, where you'd expect. We're in this sort of.
that one on the left looks like it's parked.
Yeah, it may not. As
And
far
you've
as I
got
can see, that's parked.
Yeah, you've got an oncoming vehicle. There's a
Yeah.
where's the hump? It says hump.
Further up, I think.
Okay, yeah. So there's a load of parked cars, but there's also one coming out from the left that'll slot in. You'll probably try and slot in, I guess, behind the white one.
Yeah,
And then there's another one coming as well, and you're not all going to squeeze through that gap.
exactly.
So
So
I'd be hanging back.
yeah, information. Yeah, you've covered the information. Position. Well, we can position to go through there for maximum visibility. We can see this car. We can see that one. We've positioned for and safety. So by adjusting the speed down to walking pace, we can go down through the middle and change our plan if they do, in fact, pull out in front of us, or this one, rather than holding back, stays where they are. So it's about prioritizing the various things. Probably the biggest danger is that one, because I don't think they can see us. Possibly this one, there might be a car. It's actually by a school, so who knows? Some children might just get out of the passenger door or run around from it. So there are multiple hazards here. So we have to kind of decide what we're going to do, and that might be to edge forward through the gap slowly. If I'm not saying that's the definitive answer, because it depends on the circumstances. You might arrive there and this car is actually moving, edging out, so it's safer to do it. You say, just wait and see what happens. Or it might be to edge through with a maximum security. But yeah, we have to look at all the factors in there, the multiple hazards, and prioritize what we can deal with and what we deal with first. So this thing called a driving plan, as I stress, it's not how we drive to Bournemouth or something or whatever, I'm going to go down the M1 and onto the M5 or whatever. It's what's going to happen in the next few seconds, how I'm going to deal with this hazard. And we base it on what we can see, obviously, but what can't be seen. And this is where we need our imagination and thought process to consider what might reasonably be expected to happen and possibly have a contingency plan. Here's an example. So, who wants to talk? Robin, do you want to talk me through this one?
Okay, so I'd say quite a, like you say, wide open road.
Yeah.
Headlights, like possibly be a 30-mile-per-hour limit, and you've got the bins out.
Speed limit.
But sorry, natural speed limit. You're right. I'm just thinking.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, so it's fast road. Yeah.
But you've also got like you say, bins are out, and you've got a cyclist in the.
Oh, very good, very good. It is a bit indistinct, but just there for anybody.
Yeah.
Who's sitting in bright sunlight.
Yeah. And cars visible just around the corner there. Not sure what's happening.
Very good. So we picked on bins out, cyclists. So bins first. What can we reasonably expect to happen?
We might see a bin wagon.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cyclist, we're going to have to go past them, aren't we? Are we allowed to go? Oh, no, I'll come back to that question. Ignore that me for a minute.
Just to go back to the bins, there might be people, a bit like me, last minute, shit, it's bin day, pulling it out.
Yeah, that would be us too. Yeah.
Or equally, the bin wagon's bin, I'll pull it back.
Yeah, there might be, yes. Or they might have blown into the road and all that, if it's a particularly windy day, all sorts of things like that. Very good, very good. We also have this redefined cyclists a bit. They come in two types. This is Bob. He's called Bob. It stands for bloke on bike. He will often have a carrier bag hanging from the other handlebar because he's just harvested some potatoes and some stuff from his allotment and he's cycling back. He never looks behind him. He's always lived in this house on the right, so there's no need to signal when he moves because everybody knows he lives there, obviously. But there's another sort of cyclist, and they're called Bill. That's bloke in lycra.
There's often
They drive. Pardon?
There's often lots of them together.
Yeah, they hunt in packs. Yeah, they go quite fast. And again, they never look behind. Actually, they do look behind, but that's not going to stop them doing anything anyway. It's got a death before dishonor, so you've got to be very careful with those as well. But anyway, this is Bob. This is definitely Bob. You have to handle them in different ways, but I won't go into that right now. Oh, all right. Here's another one. Okay, who wants to tell me about this one? Robin went last time, so I'm going to pick somebody. We've lost somebody, haven't we? Manya, you might have seen this before. I don't know. Manya, do you want to tell me about this one?
Yes, well, it looks like a humpback bridge, and I am positioned, I think, on a side road coming out to that.
We need to move out and then to go over.
Yeah, and again, the road surface looks a bit icy.
Yeah, I can see. In fact, you can see some skid marks there, which is interesting.
Yeah. So obviously I can't in the photo see what's coming on my left-hand side, but before pulling out, I think I would sound my horn there if I'm turning right.
What would you particularly, is there any sort of road you particularly look out for on this sort of road?
Well, I mean, cyclists again, horse riders,
Vulnerable.
and what I personally tend to do at humpback bridges, I wind both my front windows down so I can hear if anything is approaching as well.
That's a good
and
idea.
There might be agricultural vehicles around. Pedestrians.
Good. Very, very, very good answer. There is one vital thing that you may not have spotted in this picture from what you said, and nobody does. So that's a very good answer. But, Kath.
There's a motorcyclist.
Motorcyclist.
Coming towards us. Yep. He's all black. He's black, and the light's just catching his shiny bits.
Ah, yes.
Yes.
But hopefully, I would have been able to hear him.
Yeah. Hopefully, you'd be able to hear him. But you may. And this actually it's deliberately difficult to see. This was taken from a motorcycle safety type thing to illustrate that point. Look once, look twice for bikes, and look for those. This is why I deliberately didn't tell you this in advance, because it's a winter's day, there's low sun, it's silhouetted, it's so on. They're wearing black and white against a black and white background. It's very hard to see them, and that's the point of this, that you've got to look quite carefully for it. So don't rush these things. We want good observation. Good answer though, Manu. You picked up just about everything else in the picture. And I always like it when somebody doesn't spot because we can get the full message of this picture, that you really need to look extremely carefully, because at a quick glance you may not see this person. This is another humpback bridge. I'm not going to dwell on it because Manu actually answered all the answers on the previous one. This doesn't have a motorcyclist on it as far as I'm aware, but that could reasonably be expected to happen. So what you said about the horn warning was good. My only reservation is that when my children were small, we lived in Shropshire, and our house was this wasn't where we lived, but our house was quite close to the back of the Humpback Bridge. It was kind of where my marker is now, roughly. And when the children were small and getting them off to bed, every bloody third car sounded their horn going over the bridge and woke them up. So just drive slowly. And there is an answer there, that approaching this with caution, maybe with your windows down and so on, is equally good. Because if otherwise, you both honk your horn and then collide somewhere in the middle of the bridge. And apart from ticking the box, did you give a horn warning on the accident form when you give it to the insurance, it doesn't actually provide anything. Anyway, moving on. Oh, we were right. It was bin day. Yes. And there they are doing what they do, clearing the bins and so on, which is great. They've often got big flashy lights all over the van, and they will largely block the road on purpose because they're protecting their workforce, not unreasonably, but often with the lorry. So they will park the lorry here and the other guys will work to it in some cases. And here we've got a double white line. Are we allowed to cross it to go past this vehicle? Robin?
An interesting point. So I think the highway code said no. Double white line said do not cross. But I think
there are some exceptions. Let's see if you can guess what they are.
so the exceptions would be if there's a hazard that forces you across, and it is safe to do so. It is safe to cross.
That's a good catch-all. That's safe to do so, but actually, it used to be to go past a stationary object, which arguably this bin lorry is. It got changed quite a few years ago now to go past something, well, like Bob, the cyclist, bloke on bike. As long as he's doing less than 10 miles an hour, we can go past him. We might have a problem with Bill because he's going faster, broken lycra. But let's assume they're going less than 10 miles an hour here, and it's safe to do so. We can go across it. There are a couple of there is another exception. If you lived in a property on the right-hand side here, your driveway was there, you're allowed to go into that driveway and cross it. Otherwise, you have to drive 2 miles up to the roundabout and come back every time. But you are allowed to do that. Or, if directed by a policeman in uniform, just to be complete. But, yep, we were right about the bin day, and this is what you're going to come across. So, it's 5 to 11. I've probably got another half hour or so. I'm just warning Kath, I know you've got under time pressure. Let's have a look at the system in action then. Information phase, we're gathering information all the time, all the way through the hazard. So there's our vehicle. First thing that we consider is, okay, I may need to change my position. I'm going to turn right at this junction. So I'm thinking about that straight away. I may need to check the mirrors and move into the appropriate lane. So as soon as I spot this hazard, I'm looking at the road signs, I'm looking at the road markings, I'm gathering as much information and about what I need to do in order to negotiate this. And the next thing I'm considering is my speed. How can I safely go around this corner? Now, let's say, well, 20 miles an hour is the safe speed, but not if there's a car there already. So I don't have enough information just yet to make that decision, but I will keep slowing down, keep slowing down, keep slowing down until I've got enough information to commit to doing that turn. So it's not a predefined thing. It depends on the information I'm receiving. But I need to slow down enough and have made that decision to give myself enough time to comfortably do a gear change, assuming we're driving a manual car. And I want to do that gear change before I turn the wheel. Because now I'm in the danger area, now I'm in the junction, and I want to be in full control of the car. I want my hands back on the wheel. I want the car in gear at the right speed, just being driven. I can keep my eyes outside of the vehicle, and I haven't got anything else to worry about until we're clear of the hazard. So I need to make sure I've done all that stuff before we get into that danger zone beyond the dotted line. Here's another example at a roundabout, same sort of story, information all the way through the hazard. We're gathering information. First thing I consider is the position. It's broken into lanes. There may be different road markings that make it somewhere exceptional. There may be more than 2 lanes and so on, but we're turning right. So in this case, the right-hand lane, checking the mirrors, moving into that lane. Now I'm adjusting my speed. And again, the speed is totally dependent on the traffic and the particular situation, and I might not know the speed, so I'm bringing the speed down. We sometimes say I'm planning to stop but looking to go, planning to stop but looking to go. If I get a nice clear gap or the break in the traffic, great, I can go around. Otherwise I'm going to have to stop. So bringing the speed down, and once I'm at the right speed, which might have been a stop, then I can change gear. And once And in any case, before I get into the hazard, I have to start turning my steering wheel. So I want the gear change done before that. And before the gear change, I need the speed to have been done. And before that, I've changed position. And finally, we can accelerate around the hazard, changing my road position because I started off on the inside and then I've got to cross over to the outside. So I've got to check positions and maybe change my indication at that point. Okay, that was the system in action. Sometimes we can get links, observational links that give us a clue something else is going to happen. We've seen one already. We've seen the bin lorry and so on. We saw the bins. High chance that we're going to get people in the road, either the bin lorry or the operatives and so on. But here's a few others. What can we see from this picture? Who should I pick on? Manya. Where does the road go for a start?
Yeah, the road is bending to the right-hand side.
Good.
So again, positioning to the left-hand side as much as possible. The road is slightly damp. It's autumn. It doesn't look as if there are any leaves on the road. And well, the road bends quite sharply. There's no road markings, but you can see it on the left.
What things tell you about the? I'm asking really obvious ones actually, but what tells you the road is going around to the right?
It is the lamp post or electricity post, telegraph poles.
You can see that those kind of go around like that. Now, maybe that they cross the field, but that's a bit of a clue that it's carrying on. It's quite a sharp bend around.
And then also the road markings, you can see there's indicating that there's a bit of a hazard there.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure you've all seen this before, but there are short road markings which just indicate one side of the road from the other. But these long ones mean you're coming to a hazard, like a junction or a bend or something. So these are long ones, so quite right. I think you've covered pretty much everything. This one, actually, when it was taken, I think was even icy. It was certainly quite cold, and it was winter time, and the sun, sort of low sun like that, streaking across the head, warms this side of the road, but not the other. More obvious probably in real life than in the picture. But again, sometimes, although we've got a great, dry, nice road surface on this one is slightly wet and may even be icy. Sometimes you get uneven melting like that. But good answer. Thank you for that. Oh, look at this one. We've got a few things going on here. How do we read the road on this one? Who should I go for? Kath, because I know you're disappearing any minute, so I'm going to pick on you.
Well, first of all, there's a pothole on the left-hand side. So I want to stay out of that, but equally I do want to move over to the near side to maximise my view around that sharp bend. There's a deviation sign, but there's also going to be a junction soon because I can see traffic approaching on another road from the left.
Yeah. Or could that be the road that wiggles round that way?
Oh, it could be, yeah. Yeah, but okay, so then there's people coming round a sharp bend towards me that might be changing their position to maximise their view round the bend that I'm coming round.
There's a lot of stuff we don't know, is the bottom line. That's a very good answer, by the way.
There may be people hidden in the corner. There may be motorcyclists coming around at 45 degrees.
We honestly don't know what we don't know in this one.
Yeah.
It could be a junction. I think it is in actual fact. You were right the first time, but just to be a devil's advocate, it might be.
No, I think you might be right. Actually, I think that deviation sign is a double backboard. Look at the number of legs it's got.
Yeah.
I think on the other side of that is the deviation sign for coming the other way.
There's one more thing. I'm just going to cut you off there because of time. But you see this really straight hedge here up to there. Why is that so straight?
Buses and lorries come along here.
Absolutely. It's a major road, and whacking those has the effect of trimming it. So you know there's quite heavy vehicles in it. You can tell because it gets to a certain height, and then it's above the height that they get hit, as it were. Let's look at the next picture. Bit further on, this car is approaching this. Actually, it is a junction. I think it's the same one, but this lorry is approaching here. Now, we might have followed. I'm going to give you some more information about this one. we've followed this car for a little way, maybe the last half mile, and we've noticed when he's braking that this brake light cluster here isn't working. If we blew this up, you actually see it is broken, it's physically broken. But let's say I'm telling you it doesn't work. What's going to happen next in this picture? What do we need to do? We're a reasonable distance from them. So there's two things. He could be carrying on around to the right. What if he's turning left? What if he's indicating left here? What are we going to see?
We might see the lorry coming out sort of
Absolutely.
before he turns left.
So let's assume that he indicates. We can't see the indicator because the thing's broken. But the lorry driver sees him indicating left and slowing down. So maybe he pulls out in front of him. Now, I know it's a lot of suppositions, but you could almost abbreviate it to, we don't know quite what's going to happen here because it's all a bit weird. So what are we going to do about it? Back off and slow down until we've got more information. So this is about information gathering. If in doubt, slow down, gather more information. Okay, very good answers on that one. A lot of information is given to us via road signs and road markings. Goodness knows how many thousands, millions of pounds are spent on road signs. And one of the things that we do as observers is ask people, what was the last road sign you passed? And you're amazed, until we've had a bit of training and encourage them to look at them, how many people have got not the slightest clue what it was they've just passed. But they can give us an awful lot of information. So here's a quick test. Who knows what this one means? Preferably on.
Dual carriageway becoming a single carriageway.
Yep. What about that one? Often seen with the other one.
Two-way traffic.
Two-way traffic. You often see them together. So it goes from a dual carriageway to a single carriageway, and then it warns you that it's now two-way traffic. Okay, very similar one. It looks like it's just been turned sideways. What does that one mean? I can hear somebody very faintly. I don't know if somebody was answering there or.
So it means that I didn't say that, but it means that you've got both-way traffic crossing your.
Right. So two-way traffic is crossing your road. So what does that say about your road? Does it say
One way?
Yeah, you're on a one-way street. If you didn't know that already, you should have seen one that told you're on a one-way street already and should know that. But yes, this is two-way traffic crossing your one-way street that you're on. Blue sign with a 30 on it. Any ideas?
Minimum speed?
Minimum speed. Yeah, you don't see them very often, hardly at all now. There used to be one or two. There used to be one on the Aston Expressway. You're going to Birmingham, it's not there anymore. They don't do that. Occasionally you get them in tunnels and things, particularly on the continent, but not very much in the UK anymore. But I don't know when I last saw one in the UK. But yes, minimum speed 30.
No entry.
No entry. Any more takers on that? It's actually not no entry.
Clearway?
Clearway. Actually, you was half right, Kathy. It's sort of no vehicles.
No vehicles, actually.
It often has a metal plaque underneath it that says something like, except bicycles being pushed or something like that. But yeah, that's an odd one out. And whoever answered
Clearway, yeah.
Clearway, which means no stopping, no waiting. And somebody told me, I believe it's true, that the Highways Agency or whatever are under an obligation to provide more lay-bys. If you have this, therefore you can't stop on the side of the road, then there tend to be more lay-bys on roads that have that. But I'm not sure whether that's true. Here's what interesting. What's that mean?
The main road is turning left, and you've got a side road coming out on the right hand.
Yeah, that often confuses people. There's a few around here. and I'm sure your observers will find one for you at some stage. And it confuses people because the people here don't see the road ahead and just zoom straight out. And likewise, people, you sort of say follow the road, and they not sure where to go and things like that. So look out for those. There are quite a few of those around actually. A brief note on ordinary direction signs. Here's one. This happens to have a blue border. Quite often they have a black border, is probably more common. It can be either. But black writing and black signage on a white background. This is a local direction sign. They take the layout from the Ordnance Survey. So it gives you quite a good plan of what the junction looks like. Not precisely, but we can sort of see it goes round to the left and there's a junction at 45 degrees. And there's the road it relates to, and that's pretty much true. The other sort of sign are these. Green background, white signage. If it relates to a motorway, it's blue. Otherwise, it's black on white. But the green background, these are schematic. The junction may well not be quite as regular as that. The roundabout might not be exactly circular. It may not be that these are at exactly 45 degree and then intervals and so on. But they give you a good idea where it is, but they're schematic. So if we look at this one, black on white, this will be more like this. There is a little stubby road there, and then the main road goes off to the left, and this one will be at whatever angle that is, 30 odd degrees off at that direction. Any thoughts about any hazards we might encounter near here?
Emergency vehicles.
Yep, good one.
And also, you could have low-flying aircraft or sudden aircraft noise. I don't know how far it is from the airport.
I don't know either, but yes, that would be a good answer.
And taxis taking people to the airport that might not be all that hot on signalling.
And occasionally, you also get people who are unfamiliar with driving on the left, who've just hired a car at the airport. But I'm stretching things now to it happens. So here's a black on white sign. So this will be a good reflection about what happens. The road bends around to the left and sweeps us onto this oval shaped roundabout. And on a previous course, I did ask people what extra hazards could you expect on here. Oh, TA, Territorial Army Group, you might have tanks on the road, somebody suggested, but I think that might be stretching things a little bit far. But anyway, pay attention to road signs is the bottom line. People don't give enough attention to road signs that you can get a lot of information once you start noticing them again. So positioning. When we drive, it's nice to imagine we've got this zone of relative safety around our vehicle. It's kind of egg-shaped, a sort of rounded, I don't know what's the appropriate name for that, oval shape. Slightly narrow at the sides, but extends behind us, in front of us, and really we shouldn't have any vehicles in our zone. But sometimes we've got to squeeze through a gap like this. It's quite a narrow road. There's parked vehicles on the left-hand side there. The only thing we can do is drive more slowly. In the ideal world, we would definitely give enough room to these parked cars for them to open their car door and somebody to step out. If we can't, then all we can do is drive more slowly. So whenever our zone of safety is impinged, go more slowly. Bottom line for everything, really. Now we've got a couple of exceptions to things. We've got a bend round to the left there. We're in a line of traffic and there's some sort of junction coming up because there's a sign. I can't quite see what it is right now. If we've got a bend going around to the left, which side of the road do we go to? We go near side or offside generally?
Offside.
offside. We'd normally move to the right, the offside, to get a better view. But in this situation with a lorry and a great big Land Rover, whatever it is, sitting there, sometimes, despite the road wind, the best view is up the inside. So while we've got a general rule we would move to the right, it's not hard and fast. If we get a better view by looking up the inside, great, we'll take that. And now I can see what the lorry is doing when they indicate to move off or something. I've got a little bit, I can see the, whatever it is, a van coming or a car coming and so on. I've got the better view there. So it's not a hard and fast rule that I stick to the offside. In fact, a little bit further on, I've resumed my position because that I can now see the car and so, and over here there's some sort of snack van. Who knows? This lorry might be indicating to go into it if I'd, which I might not have seen if I'd been right up behind this van. So we position for the best view. Safety first, then the best view. Now, something that I'm going to introduce a couple of topics that will be covered with your observer, and it sometimes worries people when we talk about this, and there's nothing to be worried about. Normally, when you deal with a roundabout, if you're going left or straight ahead, you'd probably be approaching the left-hand lane and you keep left all the way around the roundabout. That's what we're taught. Or if we're going off left, we do that. Unless you're going, actually you can go across it in the right, you leave in the right-hand lane as well. So you basically would go in like that. And what we're saying is, guess what? If there's nobody there that you're going to affect, if there's nobody there, don't worry about it. You can cut the corner. You can make it slightly straighter than it might have been beforehand. This requires good observation and planning. But we're saying if you do that, the car's not thrown about as much. You can go slightly faster, but it relies that you have actually checked there is actually nothing there. So there's a lot of provisos in that, but we're saying on certain roads, roundabouts, certain bends, we can straight line it if we can see that it's safe to do so and it's not going to affect other road users. I'm not going to say any more about that. It's one of those practical skills type things that you will deal with, but it does scare the pants off some people. Say, well, but that's not what I was taught when I was learning to drive, and surely you can't do that. And I had actually one of the police specials who worked in the control room said, but we get phone calls every Friday. We think somebody's drunk. They seem to be all over the road and straightening out bends and going straight across roundabouts. We're not meaning doing that. It was very worrying for him that where I was asking him to do that in certain circumstances, but you will deal with that. What I really want to talk about now is our technique for overtaking. This is quite important, and I want to discuss the theory of it. Again, it's a very practical skill that is probably the most dangerous thing that happens on a road, overtaking, and the thing that is almost never taught. It's very unlikely your original driving instructor taught you how to overtake anything very much. Now, we can all cope with it on dual carriageways. I see Kath has just disappeared, so I presume she's got her guests and stuff. It's now 11:15. We can all cope with dual carriageways. That's fine. You move out in good time, go past. That's fine. And this is pretty much what it shows in the highway code. Move out early, go past. When you can see them in the rear view mirror, come back in again. That's what the highway code said. Works fine on dual carriageways. Works fine on single carriageway roads if you've got a lot of very long vision, if you've got a lot of clear road space. But it is difficult if you haven't, if you very rarely have that space. So here's a slightly different technique, which is the one that's advocated in roadcraft. You very often come up behind a car and you're following them for some time, and you know you want to overtake them. You know, it's a slow moving van, I don't know, it's a slow moving car. You know you want to overtake them, but an opportunity doesn't present itself. So you just take a normal following position, at least 2 seconds behind it, and so on, until an opportunity, a possible opportunity to overtake presents itself. Maybe you followed them and you know there's a nice right-hand bend coming up, and you can follow them through the right-hand bend, and looking out to your right, you can see down the straight, and so you know that's going to be a good opportunity. As you come out of that bend, what you can do is close the gap a bit to 1 second, so you're closer to them to minimize the distance. And if it looks like it's safe, move on to the other side of the road. Now, you're only going for a look at this point. You move sideways to have a good look. And the important thing is, once you've had that good look, I don't know what the percentage is, but quite often when you've had the good look, something comes into view. You can see there's an entrance. You can see there's a junction that you hadn't seen before. Maybe there's another car coming. Move straight back. Now, this is the important thing, is you move out, but not forward. You're just moving sideways relative to this to look. And only when you can see it's clear do you carry on with the overtake. Let's have another look at this, a slightly animated version of it. You come up behind a lorry or something that you need to overtake. You close the gap a bit, so you're a little bit closer, still maintaining vision down there, down the outside. But when you think the overtake might be on, move sideways and look. If it's not on, move back in again. Now, it's very tempting to close that gap when you're out on the wrong side of the road. Be very careful, because you need to be able to move back in behind the other vehicle. Sometimes they slow down to be helpful, which can cause you a problem with that. So just be very mindful of that. But this time we move out, and this time there is a clear route. We can say, yep, we're on, and we can then continue our overtake and then back in when it's safe to do so. So I'm just going to go back to that schematic. Go back a slide. I could have done it slightly more elegantly. I wish I hadn't done that now. There we are. 3-part overtake. When we think the overtake is on, prepare the car, get a low gear. Maybe if you're in an automatic, either lock it down into second or go into sports mode or something like that to give you the acceleration. Close the gap when you think it's on, move out sideways, have the very good look, and then only proceed if you're sure that's on. Whiz past and back in. Okay, so that's I'm going to move on from that. Any questions on that? Because it's often a very different approach to what you may have been taught, if you were taught at all when you did driving test. Above all, don't forget the golden driving room. You must be able to stop safely in the distance you can see to be clear. In an overtake, it's quite tempting to put your foot to the floor and then you arrive at the next bend going horrendously fast. So just be cautious. You just need enough speed to go past them safely and back in again afterwards. In conclusion, I did move this diagram, which we normally do this as a handout. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but quite often, a lot of people's approach to driving, rather, is to look in front of the car and react to what we see. And we're trying to build on information. As we said, information is key, and we take in information, we process it, we use it, and then we give information to other road users, as we talked about. So observation is vitally important, and planning is then derived from what we've seen, and what we can see, what we can't see, what we can anticipate happening, that forms our plan, and we'll deal with the hazards that we're dealing with by positioning, speed, gear, and acceleration. So this is an attempt to put everything on the same diagram, all the things that we've talked about so far today. We've talked about the system of car control, but particularly all the things that feed into that. Observation obviously is key, probably the most important, followed by creating that short-term driving plan. How are you going to deal with a hazard in the next few seconds? And a little bit about different sorts of positioning according to that. Any questions on what we've done today? None?
Only about automatic cars, and if they have the facility to go into manual. What does that form part of the test or not?
Firstly, for most advanced driving, modern cars, modern automatic cars are very quick at changing gear and so on. I remember driving one 20 odd years ago. You could hear it as you tried to accelerate, you could hear it going clunk, 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 and eventually accelerated when it had found the right gear it wanted. These days, they're extremely good. So 99%, and some people would disagree with me, but 99% of the time, sticking it in drive and leaving it there is fine. What an examiner on the test is keen for you to do is to know that you know how it works. So if you have got a sports mode, if you have the ability to use other modes to lock it in, say second or third or something, that you're able to use that. So for most of the drive, I would just use it as an automatic. For things like overtaking and certain situations where you really want the performance out of the car, consider using sports mode. I particularly like it on, I've driven an automatic occasionally. I drove one with a police driving instructor, and he had me on the country roads where we wanted to slow down for the bends and then accelerate nicely out of them, had me put it in sports mode. And the other case you might use it is for overtakes. As you get into that position, we find a following position. When we spot an overtake might be on, that's where you might lock it down into one of those other modes. Now, it's hard to give general advice because each automatic seems to be different these days on precisely what they have available. So it's worth looking in the manual. If you're not sure what a setting does, definitely check it out and experiment in your own car. But in those situations, as we say, the automatics are quite good, but they can't look ahead and predict what's going to happen next, particularly in things like an overtake. So using a more responsive gear in that situation might be a good idea by whatever mechanism your car has, either say sports mode or one of those other modes that you can lock it into. But the guy I'm driving with at the moment is sort of automatic. He's got a hybrid. It's got an umpteen mode. It's got a sports mode. It's got all sorts of other things. So it's very hard to give completely general advice these days on those. But yeah, be aware of what your car can do and the circumstances where that is useful. And you asked particularly about driving it manually. If you do, and sometimes it's useful on country roads and through towns, it might be useful to do that in certain circumstances. Apply it to the system. You do the same in the system, use the brakes as before, and then do the manual gear change straight after braking, but before you steer in the whichever hazard it is you're dealing with. Is that kind of cover it?
I think so, yeah. I think so, yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Any more questions from anywhere? Manya, Gath? Well, that's me pretty, at the end of the slideshow, I'll leave the other one up. That's me pretty much done. Were it an ordinary classroom session, we would then take you out and do demo drives. We can't do that because of the situation. But as I say, if there's anything you're not sure of, or you would like a demo drive, do contact your observer. They will be happy to do it, I'm sure. And certainly, if not, if they can't for any other reason, I'm happy to do it. Contact me either directly. I think my details are in the bulletin towards the end of it, or via Henny or through any of the other committee. That's fine. I'm happy to do that and give you further pointers. The only other thing I would say, for though I know one of you is nearly test ready, but Robin, you're just setting up. Some people go through the course and think, it would be useful to sit on that theory course again. Now I've done all the practical side, because I'm sure they said something about Overtake. I'm sure he said something about bends right at the beginning. I wish I could. By all means, attend the course again. There's no problem with that. You're more than welcome to sometime in the future. So other than that, that's me done. Thank you for coming and being a very attentive group and answering all the questions, and so well. And all the best of luck for your driver training over the next few weeks, and for your tests, those who've got tests coming up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.